to say the 2020 presidential election and its aftermath have been chaotic would be an understatement of epic proportions. But now we're getting new insights into the real depth of that chaos. Beyond the insurrection and efforts to overturn an election we all know about, we're learning much more about the deep divides within both parties. Like when Nancy Pelosi claimed Obama is jealous of Biden. That was when the current president was still seen as transformational. Or when would-be Speaker Kevin McCarthy said he would urge President Trump to resign after the insurrection in leaked audio recordings. These are just some of the behind-the-scenes moments being revealed in the great new book, This Will Not Pass, Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. The authors are New York Times national correspondents Jonathan Martin and Alexander Burns, who join me now. Alex, Jonathan, congratulations, and thank you both for ruining my weekend. I appreciate it.
A weekend well spent. A weekend well spent.
Exactly. Well, let me tell you.
Beach read.
You know, the subtitle of your book, as I read, Alex, is Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future. I think you could have added, if there is one. When you two were reporting and writing this book, was that not part of what you were thinking every night at the end of your work, Alex?
Well, I think, Jim, I think one way to look at that subtitle is the battle for America to have a future, right? The battle to secure the future of the country. There are multiple visions of what America ought to look like that we record in this book. And one is the Donald Trump sort of quasi-strongman view of government, and another is the more nostalgic and conventional Joe Biden view. And I think what we show here is that both of those approaches, obviously in very, very different ways, have really fallen short of the political moment. And the battle to define what comes next in so many ways is only just starting.
You know, Jonathan, we see McCarthy, we knew, humiliating himself, going down to that Mar-a-Lago bended knee thing, doubly humiliating himself when you report that he said to colleagues he was going to urge the president to resign. No, I never said that. You released the audio recording. Obviously, humiliation again. Lindsey Graham, while you're interviewing Trump, calls in. Trump puts him on speaker without even telling him. And there's so many more. Why do so many Republican leaders tolerate being humiliated at the hand or foot of Donald Trump and still pledge fealty to the leader?
Well, it's a great question. I think it's two important issues. One is relevance. I think Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham both want to be in the room, as they say. And I think sucking up to Trump and even humiliating themselves is part of the bargain when it comes to Trump. As you mentioned in the book, we have this extraordinary scene where Lindsey Graham is sort of put on speakerphone by Donald Trump and told to perform and basically tell us, the two people there to interview Trump, not just how important of a politician Donald Trump is and how great his endorsement is, but also just how damn good of a golfer Donald Trump is. I think Trump likes to sort of do that to people, to sort of prove to people that they are his supplicants, and to do so in the most excruciating fashion. I think the other reason is just straightforward politics. Republican lawmakers believe that their voters are still, obviously besotted by Donald Trump, and therefore the politicians themselves also have to pledge fealty to Donald Trump. Look, I think tomorrow, if Kevin McCarthy believed that the rank and file GOP voter out there in America had enough of Donald Trump, Kevin McCarthy would gladly move on from Donald Trump. This is an example of the leaders following the voters when it comes to Trump and the GOP.
You know, Alex, speaking of the leaders, can a GOP leadership that, at least in private, has utter contempt for Trump and a GOP electorate that seems to still love him, how long can that coexistence stand?
Well, we're about 7 years and counting now, right? Look, I mean, I think one of the things that we do in this book is that a lot of folks, a lot of your viewers have probably heard and read for years that Republican leaders cannot stand Donald Trump. And the way they talk about him in private is nothing like the way they talk about him in private. And I think that people understandably have gotten tired of hearing that, and frankly skeptical of the reporting that suggests that, because surely people who genuinely had a problem with Donald Trump would not sort of kiss the ring and other things as they do again and again. But I think what we've shown in this book is that they really do talk about him quite differently in private. And I don't think it's sustainable forever, particularly if he runs for president again and sort of signals at the outset that he won't accept the outcome of the election unless it's a victory for him. I think we've seen in the primaries this month, including most significantly in Georgia, even Republican primary voters, there's a limit to how much they want to talk about Donald Trump's grievances about the past.
You know, Alex, staying with you for 1 second, other than the lunatics in the Republican Party, the Marjorie Taylor Greene faction, do any of the leaders of the Republican Party actually believe that the election was stolen, as they're willing to say publicly, to make Donald Trump happy?
I think the short answer is no. Look, I think there are people in the Republican Party who believe that there is more fraud than is demonstrated. I think there are people who sincerely believe that. I don't think we encountered one person in this book who we interviewed or obtained any reporting in this book to suggest that anyone at the absolute leadership tier of the Republican Party, other than Donald Trump himself, and as you mentioned, the real sort of inner ultra committed palace guard, truly believes that there's any doubt that Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States.
You know, Jonathan, one of the things that's most terrifying to me, you guys touch on, I don't know if it's in your introduction or whatever it is, you mentioned a number of unelected leaders who have stood up to Donald Trump and maybe thwarted the worst of them. I think you mentioned people like Fauci, General Milley, et cetera. I had a former Secretary of Defense, Esper, on the radio with me the other day, and it's the same sort of theme. It was individuals doing the right thing, we believe, again, to thwart the worst of Donald Trump, but there were no institutional guardrails in place that if they weren't there, and it appears that even on bipartisan things like the Electoral Reform Act, whatever, there's no interest in Congress in creating those institutional guardrails, so we continue to be dependent upon the good behavior and goodwill of unelected individuals. Is that the sorry state of affairs?
Or in the case of Mike Pence, elected individuals.
Yeah, that's true.
Look, I think January 6th could have been a lot worse. I mean, both physically, obviously, it could have been a lot worse. There could have been more people assaulted or killed. But I think January 6th politically could have been a lot worse if Mike Pence does bend to that pressure. And the fact that our precious democracy was basically in the hands of Mike Pence that day. And if it's not for Mike Pence's sort of good judgment in that hour, we're facing a constitutional crisis in the most important democracy on earth. Tells you a lot about the reliance on individuals and just how corroded our institutions have become. And this is the sort of big question going forward and why this book is important. This is not about history. This is today and tomorrow as much as it is about yesterday. This is a current story. There's a reason why we called the book This Will Not Pass. We're still living through this stress test to our democracy, and we're going to see how it plays out potentially as soon as 2024.
Alex, you guys are pretty even-handed in this book. I mean, you don't spare the Democratic Party either. No accusations of the level of corruption either. But Joe Biden unwilling to settle the differences which arguably a president would have in terms of the progressive wing and the more mainstream wing of his party, the attempt to be both a healer and a transformational president, which may be sort of oxymoronic kind of thing. How would you describe how the Democratic Party is portrayed in your book, Alex?
Look, I think you did a pretty good job right there, Jim. I think that we saw the Democratic Party ride to power in 2020 with this broad and in many ways unwieldy coalition that goes all the way from Bernie Sanders and AOC on the far left to former Bush administration officials in the political center. And the only thing that really united them was the sense that Donald Trump was a dangerous president who couldn't be allowed to keep power. And I think what we show in the book is that Joe Biden and his party never fused that anti-Trump coalition into something more coherent and durable that allows them to operate the government in a reliable way. I don't think that we spare either side in this book. I also think that we're very, very clear that the two sides are not equivalent in their defect and the depth and the nature of their defects. But the reality is, if you believe the Republican Party is fundamentally broken and fundamentally dangerous because it's in thrall to this disgraced former demagogue, Donald Trump, then the burden is that much higher on the governing Democrats to show the American people that there is another way.
You know, Jonathan, as I am panting my way through the end of this book in bed over the weekend, I read a quote from Malcolm Turnbull, former Prime Minister of Australia, who describes moderate, conservative, when he's talking to you guys. Here it is. You know that great line that you hear all the time, this is not us, this is not America? You know what? It is, actually. And right after I read that, I went online and I saw an interview you two did on the CBS Morning News. And you said something, Jonathan, like, well, the optimistic take on this is voters control their destiny, but I would argue they don't control their destiny. Campaign finance laws, voter suppression laws, a Supreme Court that doesn't give a damn, where the American people are overwhelmingly on issue after issue, like abortion, for example. So how do the voters in America in 2022 and beyond control their destiny?
I mean, I would refer you to Donald Trump, who lost the presidency and lost both chambers of Congress. We get this question a lot from people talking about the book, which is, when is Donald Trump going to face accountability? And look, from a legal realm, I can't litigate that. I don't know what's going to happen to him judicially. But like, clearly Donald Trump and the Republican Party paid a pretty severe price for the last 4 years. They lost the presidency in both chambers of Congress almost entirely as a rebuke of Donald Trump himself. So I think there has been some accountability. But look, are there structural challenges for Democrats in this country, particularly given their inability to win a lot of the rural voters who 15 years ago they were winning comfortably? There absolutely are. But I think clearly Democrats have an opportunity to take advantage of the wide disdain for Donald Trump in America. But as Alex mentioned a minute ago, they have not yet figured out a way to do so in a coherent way. In part, yes, because of their tight majorities, but also in part because their coalition is so ungainly right now. And I think Biden has never taken a side between the kind of moderate anti-Trump wing that just wants to sort of try to make incremental progress in the more progressive ideological wing of his party, which wants to remake the country. Biden never put in with either camp, and he's paying the price today.
I only have 30 seconds left, Alex. Speaking of voters having their say, the Republican Party is on the other side of voters on climate change, on abortion, on gun safety measures. Yet if the polls are right, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next few months, they're about to return Congress, the Republican Party, to power in Congress quickly. Can you explain that?
I mean, it really is an unfortunately simple reality that we have a binary political system. We're not as dynamic as other countries. If you don't like the way things are going with the party in power, you only have one alternative. And people often pull the other lever without looking too closely at the policies that are involved. And Jim, you know what happens after that? Then people start to register what the policies are involved, and they go back to the same binary choice in 2024. And if it ever feels to people like we don't get a whole lot, we don't get very far down the road in this country, we just keep on veering back between right and left, well, there's a structural reason for that.
Alex Burns, Jonathan Martin, as I said, terrific and terrifying all at once. Thanks. I really enjoyed it. Good to see you both.
Well, there's an endorsement. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
The book again is This Will Not Pass: Trump, Biden, and the Battle for America's Future.